I'm Andy Whaley with AG Financial Solutions, and I'm very honored to be here with Dr. Richard Hammar today, talking about some amazing resources specifically for our ministers around the country. Dr. Richard Hammar is the Chief Legal Counsel for the Assemblies of God, has many other amazing titles and credentials. And actually, for the less than 1% that don't know who you are, Dr. Hammar, if you would share a little bit about some of your history, your credentials, actually specifically related to the tax area.
Sure. Well, I'm an attorney. I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School, and in addition, I am a CPA. So I'm very familiar with taxes, and in particular with the application of tax law to religious organizations and ministers. The IRS National Office uses my resources, as do countless thousands of churches around the country of all denominations.
That's great. Right now, we're getting ready to get into, of course, the heavy part of the tax season. And every year, you create two very amazing, robust resources for ministers to use. Would you mind elaborating on what those two resources are?
Yes, let me begin with the larger, by far the larger of the two resources is called the Church and Clergy Tax Guide. That's 750 pages. You don't want to read this after 9 p.m., but it's, I'm thinking of putting a warning on the cover, may cause drowsiness. But this book is a reference book. You're not going to sit in a hammock drinking a lemonade and read through this cover. It's not a novel. It's a reference book. It covers all kinds of issues. And the important thing I'd say about this, Andy, it's relevant all through the year. For example, there's whole chapters on what is the definition of income. I mentioned 24 kinds of taxable income that a lot of these are unknown to many churches. I have a whole chapter on who qualifies for a housing allowance. I have a chapter on the housing allowance. I have a whole chapter on charitable contributions, a whole chapter on retirement plans for churches, a chapter on payroll tax reporting requirements, a chapter on Social Security, a chapter on tax exemptions for churches under federal and state law. So you're going to find the answer to virtually any tax issue that comes up in your church or your ministry in that book. It's a reference book. But then several years ago, I saw a need for a second resource, and that's what gave birth to the Minister's Tax Guide, which is a shorter 50 to 60 page book that addresses, it really is designed to assist ministers in preparing their own taxes. So it goes through the major tax forms on a line-by-line basis and explains them. And so the idea here is that ministers with very little knowledge of taxes can sit down with this book and their tax returns and have a good chance of being able to complete them. I often say, Andy, that ministers' taxes are not complex, they're unique. And there's a big difference. So I think that most ministers with a little effort and with the assistance of this product are going to be able to do their taxes. It's interesting that over the years, there have been 8 major Protestant denominations that utilize this tax guide. They put their own cover on it with their name. And our own AG Financial Services became the 9th religious organization to use this. It's now available free of charge to any Assemblies of God minister on the AG Financial website. So again, the shorter book, the Minister's Tax Guide, is not a reference book. You're not going to use it as a reference book. It's rather used specifically to assist ministers in completing their tax return.
That's great. And I see this resource, actually both resources every year. I'm curious, what goes into developing that every year? I assume you're not just backspacing, changing 2014 to 2015.
Much more than that. And that's true for both of my books. In fact, I always do the longer, the 750 Church and Clergy Tax Guide. I do that first, so I have an encyclopedic knowledge of all changes that have happened in the past 12 months. And then that goes into updating the smaller Minister's Tax Guide as well. So yes, I do monitor literally every change, whether it's legislative, whether it's judicial, whether it's administrative, IRS rulings, et cetera, tax court, federal district court, federal appellate court, Supreme Court, congressional, legislative changes, including looking at the legislative history, committee reports, et cetera. So it keeps me busy, believe me, because it's just unbelievable the number of tax law changes there are every year. Just this past year in 2014, we have a huge issue with regard to the constitutionality of the housing allowance. And so I spend a lot of time with that. We've had another huge issue come up with regard to a half-century-old benefit of the non-taxability of employer-paid medical insurance for employees. That has now been repealed, essentially, by Obamacare, and a lot of churches are in a frenzy over how do we respond to this. So there are just a number, just this past year, of critical tax developments that have gone into this book. So it's almost a daily challenge throughout the year to stay on top. I don't wait till the end of December and say, well, let me research what happened this year. It's an ongoing task on my part.
That's good. I like your comment that it doesn't have to be complex, it's just simply unique for ministers. But I know that the area of finance, especially taxes, can seem a bit intimidating, sometimes confusing. What would be just the basic tips that you would give to pastors watching this as it relates to them downloading the Minister's Tax Guide and actually utilizing that as a resource? What would you say are the basic things that they should know getting into that?
Well, is to print that book off. It's not that lengthy. And to sit down with your tax returns, your 1040, your Schedule A, your Schedule C, Schedule SE. And that's the way this thing is set up. The booklet is designed, and the outline is looking at the main tax returns line by line. So I really think that most ministers are going to be able to do their taxes themselves, unless there's some extraordinary development that happened in your life, like a sale or loss on securities, sale of a home. There's certain complicating factors that may require professional assistance, but not in most cases. And Andy, let me also mention that there's another component to the Minister's Tax Guide that I haven't mentioned. So it's not just a booklet to help ministers complete their tax returns, but there's an insert that deals with federal reporting requirements. And this is designed to help churches comply with their tax reporting requirements as an employer, the 941, the W-2s, the 1099s, et cetera. And so between the two, you've got I think, an invaluable resource. It's brief, it's to the point, it helps you as ministers complete your tax return, and it helps church leaders, church treasurers, bookkeepers, business administrators prepare the essential tax returns that the church as an employer must comply with.
Excellent. This resource is now available at agfinancial.org, as Dr. Hammar mentioned. We do have a color version for you to look at, but if you would like to print it off, also as Dr. Hammar recommended, we have a black and white version so that we don't absolutely kill all of your color ink in your printer. So we have both of those available. Go to agfinancial.org. That is available. Compliments of AG Financial, free of charge to you. Dr. Hammar, thank you. Every year, you create an amazing resource for our ministers that makes their lives easier.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.